Good evening, Russell Springs, Kansas. Good evening, America. This is Justin Wieland at Seeking Context with Max Haverfield. Max is a cabaret performer with a Christmas show, and he's also a cattle rancher. And we're going to find out about the life of somebody that does two things that don't seem to be similar. And I doubt that there's lots of people in the world that have the same dual profession. So thanks very much for joining us, Max.
It's an honor.
And I wanted to start out by just asking you about your show. You got a Christmas show coming up this year. And so where is it? What kind of music is it? What can you tell me about what people can expect and how they can get tickets and all those sorts of things?
Yes. Yes, we have a 7-city Christmas tour. The Christmas show is one of our 4 shows that we do. It is the flagship and the most frequent show. And this year we have 6 cities in Western Kansas and Kansas City. So that is Kansas City, Hays, Hoxie, Oakley, Colby, Goodland, and Scott City. And all of them are wonderful venues. We have some of them that are simply ticketed events. Some of them are tickets that include hors d'oeuvres and a drink ticket or two. And the one in Scott City is actually a dinner show style. And so tickets will be available about a month ahead of the show. We find that often works best when people are close enough that it can be top of mind. They can get together with their friends and make that decision. So we'll release tickets at about that point, and they will be available on my website, maxhaverfield.com, and that'll have a link to Eventbrite where you can reserve your tickets, or you can reach out to us through the website or by phone and speak to me or Jeanette, my assistant, and we'll take care of you. So hope to see you there.
What kind of music?
So this year, the Christmas show evolves every year, as I suppose all of our shows do. But 5 years ago, I started with classical style Christmas music. I studied opera, and that really went over pretty well. I hired several friends from college, and we went to all of our hometowns. There were seven of us in the ensemble, and I found, though, that my preferred styling over the course of time is a cabaret style. So I actually like it's kind of maybe a grand cabaret, I might call it, because cabaret is often very intimate. I like the talk with the audience. I like that aspect. But then some of our music is still pretty big. You know, the Oh Holy Night, and we're doing an arrangement of the Lord's Prayer this year. So there are some of those that are quite big for what you might consider a classic cabaret. So I'd refer to it as big singing, grand cabaret.
And cabaret, does that mean that like you banter with the audience? What does it mean to be a cabaret show?
Well, cabaret is an interesting little mixture of a few worlds, I would say. It is a refined style of music, which I like, coming from the classical side. It does have that element of the audience participation, interaction more so, you know, and then oftentimes you can get a drink, you can kind of relax and just have a low-key sort of evening with good music. And I would say cabaret is then different from a regular sort of pop concert in that a lot of your pianists and musicians might come from a jazz background or a classical background or a musical theater background, where they've learned some really intricate music and learn how to frame it in such a way that's appealing to a broad swath, rather than either a really big popular style, or much smaller would be the classical. It's somewhere in between.
Right. Well, your music talents are expansive. Where did that get started?
Oh, well, thank you. So, sometimes you just are kind of, sometimes just kind of meant to be. And I started singing when I was 4 or 5, did my first solo in church when I was 6. My aunt is a professional pianist. My mom is a fantastic pianist. She played for me all through when I was 11. My mom traded my mom is in advertising. She traded like 500 specialty item pins to a sound recording studio to do my first album, and we auditioned and we did competitions, and and I got the lead in the church musical, and and Mom was always playing for me on that. And then additionally, my aunt, being a professional pianist at her church and a music minister and composer, then we formed yet another bond that kind of led me down that path. And then when I was a senior, I had plans to go and be an architect, and I was in our school show, and just many people came up and said, "Are you going into music?" And it just made me think I should give it a try. So I did.
Sounds like a Whitney Houston upbringing.
Oh, yeah, right. Well,
in the church, the family was...
That's true. I suppose I did have a mom and an aunt who both were very, involved themselves. Yeah, now just for the Whitney part to really come to fruition, but but close enough.
Right. Well, you are also... Oh, actually, before I get to the ranching... there's a piano in this room. Did you grow up like singing tunes around the piano? It's Christmas time or other times around the year?
We were big into the church. That's really where we did most of our music together, was for an audience. That, I think, is a common thread for my mom, my aunt, and their brother. We all have performed a lot together. I actually studied for a couple of years as a kid with piano, and now, my grandma made my aunt and my mom practice every day, an hour a day, from 4 to age 17. And I guess my mom didn't opt for quite that level of practicing. And luckily, singing, you don't have to practice quite so much. So I opted for singing. And then when I was 16, I really felt that if I was going to go into music, that I was missing some important musical skills that went along with being able to play the piano, understanding harmonics. And so I started to take piano lessons again at that point.
But it was more of a strategy to improve your music general education than because you wanted to play.
I wanted to play. I wanted to be good at playing, and I also knew that I would need it. And so piano started out as a tool and as a hobby, because I really liked just playing for myself. Mm-hmm. And then I started playing for friends when I'd have them over, and now I've evolved to actually playing for the public, which is still more rare for me. But when I have things really hammered out, I'll play the piano. Much more comfortable singing, though.
Right. Now, your aunt, she composes music.
Yes.
But it seems like, do you compose music, or you just arrange it for your shows?
I'm just an arranger at this juncture. I think that there's possibility that I might compose someday. Every year, I arrange a little more and get a little more creative with it. But I am a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to music, and so I think I would not be pleased enough with my compositions at this time. But I do like to arrange.
Right. Well, when you set out to create a cabaret show, a Christmas show, that seems like, you've got to find people, you've got to come up with songs, you got to put them in order. What does it take to put on a show?
Well, yes, that is all true. I started out just thinking I need to give myself a stage to sing on. I am not real good at working for other people. And I do it if I have to, but I prefer not to. And so I created this album right out of college, and then toured with that and sold enough to kind of cover the expenses. But it really wasn't making a living. It was selling some CDs, and that was going okay. And then the next year, I hired several friends, and that was the year that I joined with my college friends. But I ended up wearing many different hats. Ad salesperson, ticket salesperson, music director, driver of the van, all these different things. Luckily, over the years, I've hired an arranger this year to help me. I've hired somebody to help us drive. I've hired somebody to help us with the tickets, just because it got to where I would get to the actual concert and I was worn out from all the rest, that it was, a big challenge to then be really energetic on stage and sing and MC the show.
Right. So it sounds like you feel like you're coming into your own.
Well, it's definitely at a nice new level this year, I would say. You always kind of, after you go through it all, you always kind of look back and say, okay, that worked and that didn't, and you find personalities. I have a kind of a core group now as far as the band goes that works really well together. That would be my Aunt Gary and Ken and Lenora Remmert, who are on the keyboard, the synthetic strings, and on the drums, and they're a husband and wife duo. And so the three of them plus me make it so that when we bring in 4 or 5 other singers and special instrumentalists, that we kind of can keep the foundation there, and we can add other people in more easily.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. Well, I'm going to have to pause here. I guess I was thinking about if we should transition over to talking about your ranching life.
Yeah.
Because we're currently sitting in the living room of the Haverfield family ranch,
right,
which is a working ranch. There, it looks like there's about 2 million prairie dogs out as you drive in, and you raise cattle and sell them. So I'm curious if you can tell me a little bit about that aspect of your life.
Yeah. So I worked on the ranch starting at age 14, professionally, that is. I'd worked on it as a kid all through, but started working for my grandparents in the summers 5 days a week, and did that for 5 or 6 years through about my sophomore year of college. And then I started my own little business, and I did that. But the ranch was put together by my great grandpa and a moneyed partner in the 40s, and by 56 they had a terrible drought year and ended up selling a large chunk of the ranch to my grandpa. He was a young man at that time, very young, and took a big risk, and he was able to pull it off, and kept on growing. And then my dad and my uncle came along, and they bought land, and then I came, along. And so after I worked at the ranch, I was able to get in on a program that's built for beginning farmers, and it provides low interest loans and lots of avenues for you to buy land and cattle or farm. And so I started doing that 7 years ago.
Is that a state program?
It's a federal program through the Farm Service Agency.
Okay, cool. And so what happens on a ranch? I'm familiar with grain farming, but the livestock is something that I think our audience might be interested to hear. You buy cows, you make them get larger, and you sell them? What's the... Right.
That's the simple way to explain it. What we do is stocker cattle, which is we buy steers and heifers weighing about 400 pounds, and we keep them for about 300 days until they weigh 700 pounds. And we do that every year. We buy and sell the entire herd every year. And that has been our system. A lot of people are cow-calf, so I say it that way because that's a little bit out of the ordinary. And then we also, which is a little out of the ordinary, practice rotational grazing, which is moving them, as my grandpa would have said, to mimic the pattern of the buffalo, the way that they, and not just for the sake of that, but because that is the most efficient way to have them digest grass and all that there is in front of them, and then move on to the next area.
Can you describe what the pattern of the buffalo is? And then I think you've told me before how your fencing is designed to move them from one section to another. How does that, what does that actually mean?
Buffalo naturally move in a large herd and kind of like a lawnmower, just go over everything in a big, huge swath, and meaning that they eat everything that's in front of them. With cattle, they don't do that so naturally. So you have to encourage them to do that. I mean that they split apart a lot more than buffalo. So you have to encourage them to do that. And so we split the ranch into, over 100 paddocks, and we move them every couple of days into a new paddock, which they're excited to get to because they know that means that there's something for them.
A paddock is a fenced section of your land?
Yep. They're all fenced off, hundreds, over 100 paddocks.
And how do you get them to move how do you get them to move between these things? Is there one gate between them? How does this work?
We have several sections, and each section is cut into the shape of a pie. 8 pieces. And then you rotate them. At the center of the section, there's a tank, a watering tank. So they naturally want to go to that tank too. You take them, once they get into the rotation of it, they hear you coming on the motorcycle or in the pickup, and they know, oh, this is the time. We're going to move to something better. And then they naturally start to make their way to the middle of the section and maybe get a drink of water. The fences are open. Then the whole herd, just once they maybe a couple months into being here, they understand that this is the new deal, and we're excited to get there. At first, though, you have to go round them up with either what we call a caker pickup, which has the protein cubes, which they love, or a motorcycle.
So they all just kind of want to come to that pickup because it's got a snack.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. What about cattle dogs?
We have had that, but not now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just you and a couple of vehicles. But once they're trained, one person can do the exchange?
One person can do it anyways. It's always basically one thing about our family is we tend to be loners. We like each other, but we just as soon go do a project on our own. So we probably devise it a little bit that way.
How often do they have to be, like, what's the period between switching these paddocks?
It depends on the size of the herd. The herds out here are anywhere between 500 and 700 head. And so it's on average out here about every 2 days. We have a smaller herd that's about 300 head. So that might be every 3 days.
Okay. So somebody needs to be here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, at any given time, basically through the year, we usually have 2 to 4 herds, that at least each day, 1 or 2 of them are going to need moved.
Cool. And you said some people are cow-calf. Does that mean that you are not cow-calf and
Correct.
you never buy a herd that is expected to have calves?
Correct. The only reason we have cows is because they accidentally got impregnated by the neighboring bull. So
Okay.
We buy heifers and that have never given birth, and we buy steers that are.
And what is a heifer and what is a steer?
Well,
for those that aren't familiar.
A heifer is a cow, but not has never been a mother. A virgin cow, and the steer has been fixed. Yeah, fixed. And so we don't. We're not doing any reproducing. The thing about cows and what our view is, and different people have different views, but cows require a lot of nutrients for them to sustain, and so they are eating a lot of the food. And a cow is actually a depreciating asset, just like a pickup, because what the cow is made for is to have babies. It is not made to be sold, and so you have to figure in that cow is not only depreciating but eating a lot of your food, and so it's just a calculation that we made that it's better and less work because you are not having to do the 4 a.m. birthing process for a couple thousand head
in the middle of winter.
Right.
Who are you buying your cows from, and who are you selling them to? And where does something like the Foot Cattle Company, a feed yard, where do they fit in this life cycle of cows going through the human marketplace?
They're in the second to last chapter, I would say. For us, we largely buy online. Sometimes they're in Oklahoma, Texas, Colorado, and sometimes more like Florida or Louisiana.
You buy your cows on the internet?
Yes. Yep. Almost exclusively.
Is there buymycows.com? Where does this happen?
Superior Livestock is probably, I think, most definitely the largest. They are at the time were a very forward-thinking company 30, 40 years ago when they started. They started by doing their marketing of cattle before the internet, but if you had to have satellite TV, so you'd watch the auction on TV in live time, and then you would call in and bid. Now it's evolved to doing to the internet, so you can do it that way. So yeah, it's very simple. We have a bidder number, and we buy a lot of our cattle that way. And so when we get them, they're anywhere from say 5 to 12 months old. If they're coming from Florida, they're what we refer to as age-year cattle. They have more age on them, but they're not any larger. And so that's why that time span is in there. And so we get them at that stage, keep them for the middle chapter of their life. Their lifespan might be 2 to 3 years. I mean, they might live longer than that, but because we eat them, they don't. And so once they're done at our time, which is approximately a year, then they go on, just like you mentioned, like the Foots or feedlots like that, that will feed them for another 5 months until they are ready to go to the packer.
Cool. And so almost all of them, none of those heifers would end up having calving.
Only by accident.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. How did you learn to do it? I mean, I assume it's your father and your grandfather, but or did you have to, like, when you got out of college, like say, oh, I need to do this for a profession, and have to learn at that point?
No. It was, I always called it a free college education. I got my undergrad in music and my master's in business, but I always called the agriculture background a free college education, because there may be other people experience that in their parents' realms, whatever that may be. But for me, yes, my dad was the first to educate me on a lot of the things as far as moving cattle and just the things that you're able to learn as a kid, how to keep your motorcycle going, all these little things. Grandpa then had yet another layer of education. Grandpa was a really good teacher, and so he would tell me all about, he had many, many partnerships through the 70s and 80s. He was swinging pretty big at that time, feeding over 1,000 head of cattle, and he had this ranch, and he had a 32,000 acre ranch in Colorado, and he was running the 12,000 acre Pyramid Ranch. And so he had all these, and that each of those had different partnerships. The home ranch was always his own. He always kept it kind of safe. And he always would say, or he often would say, that he's paid the home ranch off 3 times because of the other partnerships he got involved in. And and he would re-loan against this place. And then, and so, but I learned then, another layer from him. And then when I saw the opportunity with the Beginning Farmer program, it just seemed like I would be foolish to pass up an opportunity like that isn't afforded to everybody, because they don't have the qualifications or the background or the available connections to rent land and that kind of thing. So have you purchased some land of your own? Are you renting most of it? And is your operation independent from Jay? Like from your uncles, from their operations? Yes to all 3. Yes, I've purchased land. Actually, because of your dad, I have the goal of purchasing something like 1/4 of ground a year, and I'm close to that since I started 7 years ago, and then I rent quite a bit of ground as well. Some of that is from a non-family landlord, and some of that is from a family landlord. And then some of that, then I have people who help me with my Wallace County operation, and some of it I work with. I hire some people there, and then my dad and my uncle and I have an arrangement on the land that I rent with them, that we all work together on that. So a collaborative family affair, but it involves other hired people as well. Well, yes. I mean, my family, Jay and Calvin like to do things mainly with them and my brother and I. Jay and Calvin are? My dad and my uncle. Mm-hmm. And then my brother Heath is also in on the operation, and me. Heath and I, maybe it's just because we're young, we like the idea of getting big fast, and so I continue to try and make more connections and hire people when it seems to work. And then the home place is entirely managed by Jay and Calvin.
Right. And you referred earlier to my father's counsel. I assume that you're talking about his goal in the 80s to buy a section of ground or a quarter of ground
Yes.
once a year for 10 years and then get it paid off by the time he retired.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
What year are you on now?
Well, this is year 7, and I give myself a little credit. I am younger than Dave was when he started this. So, and I probably, because Dave has said that looking back, he would have continued doing it onward. So I probably would continue to buy, I don't know, for a long time, but because it just is fun to me. It's so exciting to me to get a new piece of ground, not only to get it, but then to figure out, are we going to run cattle? Are we going to farm it? Are we going to rent it to another farmer and then do an exchange? Maybe they have grass or maybe they have corn stalks that we can exchange with them. I love moving those different components around and trying to make that viable.
I recall in Dave's experience, just because of this stressful moment when he showed me how much debt he had when I was like 12. But I was like, oh my gosh, is the debt doesn't stress you out?
It doesn't. I am conscious of it, and I do at this point, because I have gotten over a couple of humps, do protect myself from getting more debt than I think. I kind of have a ratio. And so I protect myself from getting over that limit. But I did lose a lot of money the first year, and I think because I made it through that, I've gotten a thick skin about carrying that. And to be honest, the last 3 years or so have been good, And so when that's the case, the debt doesn't stress you nearly as much. So,
right. What about the moisture and the climate? Do you feel like that the lack of moisture in recent years,
that opportunity,
it makes it more difficult to have a pasture that can graze effectively? And how much has that affected you and your family?
Yeah, no doubt about it. It just cuts down on the groceries that you have essentially to feed the cattle, but it's just a law of averages, With that, drought comes, you must plan that into. I'm a big Excel nerd, and so I have the averages from when I started buying cattle of the weights, the average gain, the days on grass, the gain of heifers versus steers. So as long as you have that in your mind that this is the average, and as long as the average continues in a positive trend line, I don't get concerned about it.
So are you weighing these cows throughout the year?
No, but you weigh them at the beginning and weigh them at the end, and then you can basically assess what their daily gain was, and you can, and I oftentimes will try to experiment if I put some on corn stalks or fed some a certain protein cube or something like that to see if that worked and see how well it worked, and especially if it worked well, to really work to do that again.
Right. And so some of your land, or some of the land that you rent, is land that was farmed for raising grains, and some of it just pure pasture that's never farmed for corn or wheat or milo or anything like that.
Well, yes. So everything that we run at this exact moment is just grass. That may change in the near future as I look at opportunities of farming, but right now it's just cattle. My grandpa did farm about a third of this ranch at one time, and made the choice in maybe his 40s or 50s to just let it go back to grass and ranch because he enjoyed that. I find that's the case for a lot of people. They either really enjoy farming or they really enjoy ranching, but they don't want to do the other. And for me, I also know some people who do both, and it can be really collaborative because if you have corn stalks that you harvested, and then you can reap an additional benefit by feeding cattle on the leftovers of it. If you can kind of move those pieces around and can enjoy that aspect of it, then I think it can benefit you do both. But
you can kind of do that by having a friend that has a field of corn and paying him to graze on his field.
You can, but you don't have the leverage. A lot of farmers won't do it, or maybe they already have somebody. So when you have land that you own, you can, I find, maybe leverage that in a way to get more rented ground. A lot of times it's tied to a section of ground. Say you buy a quarter and the guy who's been farming it has also been farming the piece next to you. Maybe you can get that rented ground in when you purchase that too. That often happens. So
that's really cool. Well, you are a musician and you are a cattle rancher and you have a social life and everything beyond that. Part of your life, I understand, is here on the ranch, and the closest town is Russell Springs, and the closest larger town to that is Winona.
Right.
Winona would be 500 people, maybe? 180 people.
Yeah.
They've got a great cafe.
Yes.
The proprietors of which have been on the show. And you also spend time in Kansas City, though. So tell me about like how you're splitting your time and like how you've pulled that off, or what your sort of life strategy is for living in two places at once.
Well, yeah, I always just say I split my time. Some years it's 60-40, sometimes 50-50. It just depends on how much I'm needed. I was intending to go back to Kansas City on Friday, and today is Monday
evening.
And but something came up this week, and so I just tied on another few days, and so that just happens. And I have kind of adopted my dad's philosophy of not getting myself too booked up, so that when people often ask, when exactly are you going? I don't know. I might leave tonight. I might leave the night. I like to keep it loose, but I like Kansas City. I like the music. I like the friends that I have there. I like the talent that I'm able to find there, and I just like the city. But I like it out here too, and it has proved to be really nice in a lot of ways. Like this home that we're in is kind of a family home now, and I am out here when I'm here, and then my dad's out here every day, and so I see him every day. My mom comes out maybe every other weekend, and so I'm able to see my family. Of course, I have the ranching business, farm business, and then honestly, a lot of my concerts are out here because, in my view, they need more music than the Kansas City people, and it's easier to, from a financial standpoint, get the people there as sponsors and as patrons to these concerts. So
a lot of them sell out, right?
Well, yes. A lot might be a stretch, but some do sell out.
The show you want to go to might sell out.
Yes, exactly. It most likely will this year. And no, we have some bigger venues, honestly, this year because I think we can handle them. Like the Fox and Hayes is a 400-seat venue, and so but we do more and more every year to promote the show. And so yes, so my time is back and forth, and then I see people all along the way. I have it very systematically who I'm going to see along on the I-70 on my trek back, and
that's cool.
So it works.
I remember a few years ago you showed me a matrix of cities that you were considering for possible living, and it was like New York, L.A., San Francisco, Kansas City, Denver. I don't know if Winona was on there or not. I'm curious. I think you ran into some trouble because you couldn't really visit places like you wanted to during COVID, but you have done some of that. What is your assessment of places to live in this country and how Kansas compares, both the urban and rural areas of Kansas?
Well, I, again, am a little bit of an analytics nerd, so I put these cities, including Kansas City, into a matrix of various quality of life factors, business, friends, music scene, weather, and how important those factors were to me. I spent a month out in LA because I have a friend who lives out there, and he talks about the weather. It's so nice. And I came to find that I don't hardly even notice the weather. When I was out there, it just doesn't impact me at all. I like winter. I like summer. So I thought, well, that's not a reason to move anywhere. And I keep finding those things. Overall, Kansas City on my matrix won still, so I made the choice to go ahead and really lean into my endeavors in Kansas and stay.
That's great. And stay, I guess, was one of the factors that Kansas City does allow you to still be a rancher.
Well, that's true. It does have a proximity. When you look at yes, a lot of different businesses you can communicate online and everything, but with me, the way I will say, I did find a lot of ways through the pandemic to do things that weren't in person, but still, there's just so much. For instance, the day that we ship out our cattle, I need to be there because say you're missing 10 head out of 700. Well, that's $10,000 or $11,000. That's not a very big piece of the herd, but it's big. That's a good reason for me to be there. That's a good hourly rate if I can find those 10 head, right?
Yeah.
And so, there are days like that, of course, at the ranch that I absolutely have to be there. And then just making sure that just being tied into things, you don't get the opportunities to rent corn stalks, to do different things like that if you don't stay connected with the community. You're just absent, and that doesn't really work that well.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you would say that the farming world is a community, like the other farmers that are out here. Where do you see them out at the cafe in Winona or at the sale barn? Where does that social connection happen?
Well, I have a few friends. Of course, the shows are a great reason for me to see a lot of elevator operators and banks and different people who might sponsor the show. And then they say, well, how's the cattle deal going? And I say, oh yeah, I just sold to such and such and this, and they know them, and that. So that gives me a great reason to do that. I'm also just a big fan of calling people. Maybe I haven't met them, or whatever the case may be. I just did it. I said, hey, you have some corn stalks that are right next to me, and wondered if you'd lease them, and he didn't. Not this time, but they have before. The time before, I ended up leasing like over 1,000 acres of corn stalks, maybe almost 2,000 acres from a guy, because I just made the call, So, and he knew me. We are, but it's not like we see each other all the time. But you have to have it top of mind. It has to be fresh.
But you might see a farmer with 3,000 acres of ground that you could lease at your Christmas show.
Right.
And actually sort of turn or lead a deal that you could close in a few months after that.
Well, especially if they've had a few drinks, then I can really. But yes, it does happen,
Yeah.
And people, the family dynamics change, people age out, whatever the case may be. So you just always have to kind of be ready for that opportunity.
As you were describing your life here, I was thinking you really have like hit the sweet spot for Zsa Zsa Gabor in Green Acres. I mean, you've got the chores, you got the stores, right?
Right.
So you've got it all in terms of someone that wants the city life and the country life.
Yes.
What do you think what have you learned along the way about how you are able to be successful in these different realms? And as a follow-up to that, is it your upbringing? Is it natural instincts? Is it just you keep trying?
Well, I do like the extremes, I think. Like I was living in Winona before the ranch, and I'm like, I just want to be on the ranch when I'm here. If I'm going to be here, I want to be, in the mix of it. I view the ranch not only as a income producing thing, but as a big playground. You can bring people out, and it's just exciting to me, and it's beautiful. And so I like that extreme difference. And then going back to Kansas City, where I live in Hyde Park, which is a very metropolitan part of town. And, my friends might come by and pick me up and have a martini and go to a piano lounge. Mm-hmm. I like that variety. And I forget your follow-up question.
Well, where did the influence of Jay and Joy and your grandparents, how have they influenced the path you've taken in life?
Big. Big. I often just say I do everything my family does. My dad, of course, is a rancher. That's an easy one, and he loves it. And I didn't love it at first, but I think that's maybe the story for a lot of farm family kids. They think, well, I'll do something else. But I really am passionate about it now. And then the music was truly a hobby that turned into a livelihood. And then the music has led me to having a lot of client relationships with sponsors who help to put together the shows. And my mom's in advertising. And the other thing about my parents that's influenced me is my mom loves the city. They're both from Western Kansas, born in Scott City a week apart a few years ago. And
were they like high school sweethearts?
No, they knew each other. My two grandpas were very good friends, best friends in their old years, but they just knew each other.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't go to school together. Dad went to Leota, Mom went to Scott City, but they were both born in Scott City,
Okay.
Jay and Joy, and it just seemed kind of like a good fit. And so Dad, of course, likes the ranch. But one thing about my dad that my mom has really liked and that I appreciate too is he's willing to, like when they were dating, they went to like a Korean, sort of restaurant where you sat. I don't know if maybe it was Japanese, but they sat on little pillows on the ground and
Mm-hmm.
and did that. And my mom was just really surprised that somebody like my dad, who would be a rancher, would go and do that and then go to the ballet and do something. Maybe it's not his everyday thing or something that he even has been aspiring to do, but let's give it a try. It's something a little different. So he's got that mindset. And the mom is all about the city, but she loves the sense of reliability and just sort of old-fashioned goodness and even a little bit of glamour in the cattle business. It can be, that big cowboy, and there's some of those days where my grandpa would call it playing big cowboy. You go to the feedlot and you say, "Where are my cattle?" and look around, and that can be fun too. So they appealed to each other. But then all my life, my mom has loved the city, and we've spent some time there when I was a kid, in Topeka mainly, and my dad, of course, loves the ranch, and so there has always been a little bit of pull towards both directions.
That's really cool. I always love to ask if someone wants to get into either one of these professions as a young man, a young woman, music, or in the farming business, what advice would you have if they may not have that sort of family history that makes it just a sure bet like you?
I might almost say that it's easier to get into music than into agriculture. They're both they both have what Warren Buffett would call big moats to get through to be successful. Because on the ag side, it's just so hard to have, if you don't come from ag family and don't have that background, you just have to really work hard at collecting all that information. And then you have to go and collect all the relationships. It's possible. People do it all the time, right? I mean, new blood is coming in. But with cattle and farming, I would be a big proponent of knowing the numbers, reading all of the literature you can find on land values. And land is the big engine of farming, really. The crops and the cattle only probably for most operations. I saw a statistic once, but I can't remember what it was. But I'm guessing that accounts for maybe 10% of the value of the whole thing, whereas the land is 90%. So you really have to understand how to buy land and make it work for you. So that would be a big thing there. On the music side, I did have to kind of just go for it there. Yes, I had a music background, but I didn't want to be a teacher. And while I like singing in church and still do, I did not want to be a church musician full time. And that would have been probably an easy pathway for me to take that way. So then doing it this way, I think basically what I've done is start where somebody, maybe several people said, "Oh, we like your voice, we like your style, we like when you sang that song. Sing the things that you like, that they like, and do it where you know people. Even if 20 people come to your show the first time, or 10, go ahead and do that, and then." It starts to maybe over time. It's been 6 years. People start to view you as real, and they like this year we've been hired by an arts council that pays our entire fee to come in. So, but that took 5.5 years for somebody to view us as a professional enough ensemble to pay us a significant fee to just come in and do it.
So in both cases, endurance is needed.
Yes. I heard a saying once that said, "What do you attribute the longevity of your career to?" And the guy said, "I just keep doing it. That's what." So
yeah, well, that's great. Well, I hope you keep doing it. I hope that people can come to your shows this year. Can you refresh the audience on where to find tickets to your shows?
Yes, maxhaverfield.com. You go there, you can, here in a month, you can purchase tickets starting about November 1st, I believe we'll be posting. And then you can give us a call, reach out anyway, email, call, or through Eventbrite to purchase.
And are there any exciting announcements for the next 2 years, the future of Max Haverfield music or ranching that the audience would love to know about?
Well, one thing, yes, about this tour is we will be debuting my aunt's new music, her Christmas album, which is going to be a nice add-on to, of course, the merchandise that we have, and just to have that, on record. Additionally, we will have our new Stardust show this spring. It's a mixture of Karen Carpenter, and Frank Sinatra, and some of the other sort of golden voices of the 20th century that we will showcase and tour to, for sure, some 4 or 5 Western towns that are to be determined. So
that's great. Well, thanks so much for speaking with me, and I think that's it for today from Russell Springs, Kansas, and with Max Haverfield. Thanks so much, Max.
Thank you, Justin.